Thanks, Jenny. That allow wildlife and ecosystems to flourish. So by protecting land, green sod plays a crucial role in sustaining ecosystems, biodiversity, and we believe that by safeguarding Irish habitats, we contribute to healthy ecosystems overall. So we have protected land in 6 counties around Ireland, and we have almost 200 acres under protection to date, which is amazing, really. And then just to give you a little bit of the ethos around green sod. So work centres around the belief that the earth is a living, self-regulating organism, and that we, humans included, are all interconnected, and every living being has the right to thrive and to flourish. So today, of course, is St. Brigid's Day, and happy St. Brigid's Day to everybody. And we're going to celebrate St. Brigid. And I suppose St. Brigid was a really influential figure, when she did live, and she, was in a very male-dominated era. So we're commemorating her compassion and her strong connections with nature, connections with healing and poetry and learning, and kind of in parallel with these values. Green Sod was founded by 7 determined women who acquired land to protect and to nurture the environment. So tonight we're going to delve into the crucial things of climate change and biodiversity, and really looking at why these topics can be quite overwhelming, and for a lot of us, me included, and whilst also discovering, very actionable solutions to safeguarding our natural world. So we're really delighted and grateful to our 3 speakers for joining us tonight. We have Anja Murray. Anja is an ecologist, environmental policy analyst.
You're on mute, Janet. You've hit yourself onto mute there.
I have no idea how I did that. Okay. Hands are here. Sorry, Anja, I was in the middle of introducing you. So Anja is familiar to many of us as a television and radio documentary maker and presenter about Ireland's natural environment. She has been on programmes Eco Eye, Nature File, and Root and Branch. She writes a weekly column, Natural Solutions, for the Examiner newspaper. And her best-selling book, Wild Embrace, Connecting to the Wonder of Ireland's Natural World, was published in March 2023 and has been sparking enthusiasm from critics and readers alike. And we were just talking about how beautifully written it is. We also have Claire MacEvilly, the CEO of Airfield Estate, Dublin's only working farm and gardens with an ambition to be a sustainable food hub in a world-leading sustainable food city, which is Dublin, obviously. Claire has a background as a public health nutritionist and has worked for research organisations, not-for-profits, and the food industry for over 20 years. And last, but very much not least, we have James Haughey. James is a horticulturalist. He works for Sanctuary in Thomastown, County Kilkenny, and he's a very dedicated Green Sod Ireland volunteer. James has a passion for teaching people about the wonders of soil through his Lunch and Learn talks, which he hosts for businesses on behalf of Green Sod Ireland. So thank you, everybody, for joining in our conversation this evening.
Mm-hmm.
So as a little settler for everybody, and this was James's suggestion, so we are going to recite a poem about St. Brigid. And this poem was written as part of a collaboration in 2021 between the Museum of Literature Ireland and the Department of Foreign Affairs, which resulted in 3 poets writing 3 poems for Brigid. And this one is written by Nidhi Zak Arya Eep, and I apologize to Nidhi if I have not pronounced your name properly, but it's called Imbolc, an Invocation. Guardian of the fawn, brightest of the flame, awaken us at dawn, O exalted, hear your name. Come glinting in the hearth, coal lashes lined with soot, steel flint omega arches, fleet mare so light of foot. Milk flecked o'er the mouth, skin tight, sweet-lipped foam, suckled at the reddening ears, corners of your cloak. Glistening by a winch above, the veiled Amnion of well, hold us head neath water, that we might breathe again. Day, winter, light the torch, in dark where life is forged. In the belly, draw breath, draw rain. Thank you, James, for that little.
It was beautiful.
Right there. So, it is St. Brigid's Day, obviously. And the reason that we're celebrating St. Brigid is because I think St. Brigid means we are connected to land, and we are connected to ourselves. And once we connect with nature and we reconnect with nature, we can reconnect with our true purpose. And I think by connecting with your true purpose, you then become passionate about something, and you can then influence somebody else. And we will go through all the different ways that we can do this. But what I wanted to kind of ask people initially is, you know, do you have a relationship with St. Brigid? And kind of associated with that, what we'd like to do is champion women in environmental education and in the environmental sector. And, you know, what women have inspired you over the course of your careers. Anja, would you like to go first?
Yes, thanks. That's a lovely question to start with, and thanks for the poem. It was beautiful. I mean, I have a connection with Brigid, probably more that it's, you know, it's Imbolc, and I love the reference to the old changing of the seasons and the coming of the spring. And I know it's very early, 1st of February, to be thinking of spring, but it is traditionally the beginning of spring. It is when we start to see the land awakening a little bit. And I know that a lot of the old passage tombs, they had, you know, the light would hit the back of the tomb on this day, and on the cross-border festivals. So for that whole changing of the seasons and the coming of spring, which is so important after the long winter dormancy. And then I have had a kind of, I guess, a blending an answer to two of those questions. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I met an amazing ecologist called Anne Behan. She sadly passed away. But she lived not far from St. Brigid's Well in Kildare, and she was one of the people who inspired me more than anyone, because she was a really brilliant ecologist, and she prioritized working with community groups. She was kind of very much an enabler for people and communities to get involved in positive environmental action. And she didn't do anything that was highbrow or corporate. She was very much independent. And yeah, she inspired me enormously. And I kind of have conflated Anne Behan and St. Brigid, because she was from Kildare, quite near St. Brigid's Well there in Macurra.
One and the same. Yeah, it's amazing how you encounter somebody at quite a young age, how much of an influence they can have on you. It's amazing that you met her at that age. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and she took me under her wing a little bit, and I think it's important for all of us to kind of note that as well. It's good to if we come across somebody who is younger, and you know, has an appetite for that kind of guidance to help people along, you know, support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. James, have you any women that inspire you?
Oh, many. Well, I suppose, look, not to be twee, but, you know, my own mother, my sister, my wife, just incredibly strong women that I'm lucky to be surrounded by, you know, very emotionally intelligent people. And then even, you know, I have a wonderful assistant, gardening assistant in work, or she from Hungary, and again, just simply, she's just unbelievably kind, and it comes off in waves, you know, and I'm kind of in awe of that a bit. My connection to Brigid, I suppose, I actually went to St. Brigid's School in Kill in County Kildare. But I think you know, the story of St. Brigid is so layered, like, because, you know, she built the monastery in Kildare. And of course, Kildare, you know, the two in Irish, Kildara, you have Church and Dara Oak. You have this Church of the Oak. And we know that before Christianity and before St. Brigid, there was the goddess Brigid, who, you know, potentially there was a venerated oak grove in Kildare that the church then, of course, you know, they have a way of strategically, you know, creating buildings to kind of stomp at the paganistic side of things and to bring in their own saintliness. What I love about St. Brigid, though, is the melding of the two. Ireland's a funny place where, you know, the church may have had the intention of swaying away from the paganistic belief systems into more of a religious overtones, you know, kindness to human, a more human-centric approach to religion. But Ireland being Ireland, we can't help but unearth the other side of it. And then you have this melding of Brigid and Brigid, where there's the kindness that we know of to humans, but then you have this wonderful relationship that we know St. Brigid to have with nature. And I think certainly for myself, St. Brigid's Day, what I love about St. Brigid's Day is it seems to be an invitation to us to engage with nature. I mean, we have many bank holidays in Ireland. You know, the next one is St. Patrick's Day. And unfortunately, St. Patrick's Day has swung into, you know, drinking and that side of things. Where St. Brigid's Day is more of an invitation, as I said, to engage with nature. And really, I can't help but thinking it would be wonderful if we had a St. Brigid's Day or an equivalent every month of the year as the year unfolds. Again, just to tie us, you know, to galvanize us, to focus that little bit into what's happening around us in nature. You know, I kind of promised Janet the last time, I promised Janet that I would not take us to space in any kind of analogy since our last talk, and I'm not going to take us to space, but it does seem to me that the vast majority of us exist within the natural world, wearing a type of space suit, you know, like a NASA space suit, but the space suit that we tend to wear is one that's woven of, you know, technology and concepts. And we're kind of stomping around looking at as if nature is out there, you know, that we're kind of experimenting with it, and yet it's out there. And really what I think St. Brigid's Day does is it kind of invites us to unzip that clunky suit, step out and breathe the fresh air.
Yeah, and you're right. It's a pity that we really only do it at this time of the year. We should do it every time, all times of the year. But it's just very potent at this time of the year because, you know, you can kind of go, oh, you know, the winter is over and it's a new beginning. So it's very, very powerful from that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, do you have any associations you'd like to join or to share with us?
So happy St. Brigid's Day to everybody. I'm not sure where everyone is, but certainly today in Dublin, it was a beautiful day and so wanted after, you know, the storms of the last couple of weeks. My connection to Brigid, like many, you know, the memories of school, being taught how to make the cross really badly and, you know, unpicking it and then trying it again. But, you know, thinking and doing a little bit of, obviously, the patron saint of dairy farmers. For me, I am a rare breed, a dub who studied nutrition in UCC when nobody...
You've put yourself on mute there, Claire. Yeah.
The magic mute button seems to be popping up. And when you study nutrition or food in UCC, you're known as a cowpuncher. That's the terminology. So that's my connection. And now in terms of Airfield, for those people who don't know us, we are a beautiful 38-acre urban farm and gardens in Dublin, just up the road from the monster that is Dundrum Town Centre. But linking it back to amazing women, we have Airfield because two amazing ladies, the Overend sisters, left the land to the people of Ireland in the mid-70s. Unheard of. Prime Dublin residential land being handed over for education and recreation. We're very privileged to have it. These were two amazing ladies, and certainly their legacy is very much at the forefront of what we're doing now. But yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky. Amazing women have influenced where I am now and still continue to do it. And a bit like what James said, I also work with amazing women within Airfield. But for us, it's with, maybe it was just today and the beautiful weather and starting to see the flowers starting to poke through. It's a real refreshing, and it's so lovely that it's now a bank holiday, and it kind of creeps up on you. You kind of get through Christmas, New Year, and then you're like, wow, we now have a lovely bank holiday. So it's really special, I think.
Yeah, it's lovely. So I suppose getting to the kind of the themes and of climate change and biodiversity loss, somehow, and I know, Anja, you mentioned, you kind of touch on this in your book, or you go into this in your book, that somehow wild has become a negative thing when that wasn't always the case. And I'm wondering how that came about, and how do we kind of bring people back around? And it's probably already happening, but in your experience, how can we change that perception?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because it's our how we frame our place in the world and our relationship with the natural world. And there was a time, and I don't know exactly when it came about, but with the monotheistic religions for a start, that a shift from hunter-gatherer traditions, from paganisms, from many different gods, or seeing nature, seeing the divine in all of nature, and that we're very much a part of it, to it being there is one God who is separate up there, and then the rise as well of the patriarchy, and really that the cultural norm became more hierarchical. Anything that was too self-determining became a threat, whether that's strong women, and witches were picked out, or wolves, the wild predators, or things that couldn't be easily controlled and didn't fit within that kind of singular narrative. Things that were wild were to be stamped out and replaced really with domesticated landscapes, domesticated animals, much more controllable and manageable, everything. Like we cleared a lot of the woodlands then through medieval times, and that was a very intentional thing. And it wasn't just an economic clearance to extract the economic value of the wood. It was, no, we don't want these wild woods or these wild wolves anymore. They're not consistent with I guess a changing values and narrative around the opposite of diversity. We'll have nuclear families, we'll have religious conformity, we'll have obedient wives. Anything too diverse wasn't seen as a good thing. So that's kind of there's a lot of similarities there, and I think now we're turning back to honoring nature and things that are self-determining. So even in terms of woodlands, we're looking at, we don't have to plant our woodlands in a row anymore. We can look at allowing species to self-determine to plant themselves where the soil suits them best. We have a diversity of people and gender, and so many things are becoming more fluid and not as strictly conformist or tame as such. And I think it's a really good shift that's only just began, is our surrendering to things not being controllable. Accepting that we don't know. There's so much we don't know and we don't understand. And I think there's a shift towards accepting that as being okay, and that we are part of nature, and we can't control everything. We need to kind of surrender back and accept that we're part of wild nature.
Yeah.
It's a massive subject.
But I think that's the crucial underlying point of this, and I suppose it kind of goes back to that idea of the spacesuit, I think I would suggest that we're not so much disconnected from nature, but we're just distracted from it to an unusually high, concerning degree. And I say we're not disconnected because ultimately we are connected to nature at all times, because of course we are nature. It's just that we find ourselves, as I said, distracted. And it seems like it seems crucial. Like it's amazing thing to have these conversations, and they're so vitally important. But ultimately, we use words to communicate and to communicate these ideas. I think tying back in with Brigid and the invitation to engage, I think the crucial thing is to invite people to re-engage in very, very simple ways back into, to allow people to engage again. You know, like simple things like you don't have to hug a tree, but touch a tree, you know, touch organic living things. I was thinking the other day, it dawned on me, if we think about a regular day, like literally tactilely, what do we end up touching? You know, the vast majority of the things that we literally touch in the course of the day are, you know, synthetic. You know, you're talking about steering wheels, computer keyboards, phones, even touching somebody, you're generally touching them, you know, through clothes. And it seems like there's a very simple thing. Simply making a Brigid's cross, it really is a phenomenal thing to do, because you're holding, you know, you're holding the rush. It's a living, it's dried out now, but it's when you go out and gather the rush, you know, it's a living thing that you're touching. And when you're out even gathering the rush, you know, you become aware of, you know, the waterful soil, like the squelch of the soil around it, and then you're immediately engaged with how on earth can anything even live in this, you know. And then there's the engagement or the wonder of, my goodness, this thing is actually photosynthesizing. You know, there's just getting out, walking this time of the year, you know, it's where I'm working at the moment. There's a lime avenue, and you know, winter in Ireland is quite dark, and it can be quite bleak, you know. We don't even get that really, you know, we've had a bit of frost there, but we don't really get that big snowfall, you know, where it can be exciting. It just tends to go on and on and on. And where I work, I have a lime avenue running down to the big house, and you know, it's quite dark, but at the moment you look down there and you see these sparkly lights of the snowdrops coming up. And it quite literally is light at the end of the tunnel, you know. And it's just to get out and not just walk past those snowdrops or the winter aconite, or just to notice that as dark and as cold as it may be, there's something going on. You can see the spears of the foliage of the daffodils coming up through the ground, you know. And when you stop for a second and you take that in just for a second, just those simple acts can put you into that place. You know, you're all of a sudden you've detached from the distraction of everything else in your life, and you become, even for a moment, grounded. You know, it's amazing then how the brain works and intrudes, and that starts thinking about, God, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? You know, that kind of thing. But those moments are really powerful.
And James, I was going to say, when you talked about, you know, we touch so many things that are synthetic. Food is the exception to that.
Yes.
And that's something which still blows my mind about how disconnected people are with where their food comes from. Big focus of what we're about is particularly around educating kids. And in the summer, one of the education guides was standing and chatting about the chickens and collecting the eggs, and this little girl goes, "Can you cook that?" And it was, in her mind, the disconnect between what she was seeing and her chicken nuggets was so massive that she had absolutely no idea that it was the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's still, to me, like food is such a lovely link in this space, and reconnecting with it, and where it comes from, and how it's grown. When I started at Airfield, the team had been working on a new installation, a new visitor attraction all about soil. And I was like, soil? Like, who's going to come to something on soil? It was just like, seriously. But the minute you open that whole world, it just blows your mind. It's just really, really exciting.
Exactly.
And for people, they don't even appreciate it, how important good soil is. And that's really important to us as well.
Well, just exactly to that, there's, you can talk many words about, that whirring world of microbes, the microcosmos within soil or within water. You can talk and talk about it, and it's like, that's very interesting. But my goodness, you allow someone, then you invite somebody to actually look through the eyepiece of a microscope.
Yeah.
And my goodness, they get it. It's the experience of actually doing it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think there's something about being in nature that it's almost like sending children outside when they're cranky. It distills all of the unimportant stuff, almost becomes distilled, and your brain resets and thinks, okay, well, that's important, but that's not. It's an amazing. Maybe Anja, maybe you have looked into the reasons why that happens, or how does that happen?
I have. I looked into that and went into that for the book Wild Embrace, because there are so many impacts that being in nature has on us physiologically as well as emotionally. But when we spend time in a natural habitat, and that doesn't mean kind of a mowed parkland necessarily, but where there's things like leaves that are moving in the wind, or the kind of more natural colors and textures, as opposed to a manicured place. That soft fascination, that movement that kind of draws us out of our thinking mind, that has massive positive benefits to the way our brain works. It makes us more intelligent, more curious, more receptive, more creative thinking. Like, they've done these amazing experiments, neuroscience, looking at how our brain responds to being in nature. And there's also the things like just calming, your heart rate slows. Obviously not if you're out there being like chased by something awful, but if you're if you're in a natural environment, where you're absorbed in the sounds and the smells and the light and the color and the texture of nature, it reduces your heart rate, it reduces your cortisol levels, that's your stress hormone. And it brings us out of our kind of overthinking mind and back into a bit more balanced and a harmonious place. So yeah, there's huge benefits for us physically and mentally for being in nature. And the quality of the natural habitat, interestingly, impacts that as well. So the greatest benefits are to be found in the more diverse habitats. So let's say a diverse mixed native woodland, as opposed to a monoculture or a ryegrass field or something, which is, there aren't the same diversity of textures and colors.
It's amazing how our brains are hardwired to know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're both sets of trees, but we just know instinctively that diversity is better.
Yeah. And even the age diversity, and like, linear rows, as opposed to things that kind of fall more naturally,
Yeah. So I suppose to kind of bring us back to the idea of us all being a bit overwhelmed by climate change. And one of the questions I have here is, how can each of us nurture greater familiarity and understanding of Irish ecosystems and nature in Ireland? That was one of your suggestions, Anja, but I suppose, can we offer simple ways? And we've already touched on some of this.
Yeah, we have, and James has touched on a bit of that as well. When we engage with nature and the environment, there's a lot of bad news stories, because there are a lot of bad things happening. But it can be overwhelming when the only narrative that we get, the only stories we get, are loss, biodiversity loss, and overfishing, and species collapse and decline. And they are very, very real. bird life and insects and even bees and native bees. And, you know, I won't go into it, but there are a lot of very bad trends and things aren't looking good. But when that's all that we hear, it's so easy to feel despondent, to feel overwhelmed, distressed, disconnected. And one of the ways in which scientists have found that a really good response, well, one is coming together with friends and community. So a collective action, coming together to take action as a group of people to do something positive. So it might be a tree planting scheme within your community, or a kind of nature walks together, or you know, greening up your neighborhood. There's so many ways in which people can get engaged, but doing that as a group has proven benefits. And the other thing is becoming more familiar with nature, because I really feel that we're not going to change the majority of people in that feeling of disconnection if they don't know and love nature and have that, I guess, cultivating that connection. And it might be one of the things I like to suggest people to do is to go to one wild natural place, like a river bank or a semi-natural woodland, maybe a broadleaf woodland, somewhere that's diverse and where they can see wild species. And spend time there and go there regularly enough that you're comfortable in that space. And be quiet when you're in that space. Don't be distracted with your mobile phone or chatting with your friend, or thinking about what you're gonna do this evening or cook for dinner or whatever it is. Try and kind of be present in that space, and then start to observe the little details of things. It might be, you know, soon the leaves will be coming out, or the song or the texture. And the more familiar we become with a piece of land, it can even be a piece of forgotten waste ground, the more we start to kind of connect with the species there, with, you know, wild species. So that's one thing that I kind of encourage people to do as a learning tool, to become familiar, like really familiar with one place, and look up what kind of moss is it, what kind of plant is it. Look overhead, look at the ivy and its berries in winter, and whatever details are there, find out about them.
Mm. Yeah, I often find it just takes one little fascinating thing to sow the seed in myself and in other people. If you can see something amazing, you know, if whether it's looking down through the microscope of looking at some soil, or finding an insect like a shield bug with, you know, wonderful colors on it, it just takes a spark for somebody to then try and want to learn more, you know. And yeah, going to
Absolutely, think you're right there. And what I would call it is kind of a cultivating curiosity. So picking a thing that you find a little bit interesting, and you can go on the most amazing journey of finding more and more and more and more about that thing, and it can lead you into a whole new area. I don't want to talk too much, but I've so many examples of this, even this week, where I've been kind of finding different seaweeds and seabirds, and even feathers, you know, finding a dead bird and looking at and spending an hour looking up the structure and the function of feathers. And it was just amazing, and learned so much by just allowing what we kind of dismiss as childish, you know, being curious in a childish way. We have to make that okay in ourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. Brilliant. James or Claire, do you want to come in at all there?
There's simple things to, you know, if you're lucky enough to own a garden, you know, to just allow a patch of your garden to be a little bit wild. You know, you would be very surprised at what happens. You know, I think it's been bred into us to keep these manicured lawns. And it's nice having a nice lawn to sit out on, for sure. But the edges, when you allow the edges to just run a little bit wild, you'd be very surprised how it expresses itself. Like the soil underneath that grass is a seed bank, and it contains millions of seeds that you just don't know are there. And you would be surprised at the little wildflowers that you never knew were possible in your own garden that can pop up. And with those little wildflowers that pop up, they of course are going to draw in, you know, pollinating creatures, you know, your bees and your butterflies, which then of course are going to draw in, you know, the wider fauna, you know, the birds and mammals, and to it's a wonderful exercise in actually doing nothing. You know, you're just leaving it, you're just letting it be. But what that can do, of course, it can stimulate you to do a little bit more. All of a sudden you go, my God, look at those butterflies. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, I saw a little shrew, and then you all of a sudden you build a little insect hotel or something, you know, and all of a sudden you have this whole world that has just opened up on your very own back doorstep, literally.
And James, I'm just jumping in there because you're so right. It's amazing to see what happens when we leave a patch of ground go, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier of control. If we let go of control and we don't have to mow the lawn so regularly and let it do its own thing, it's amazing what can come back.
Absolutely.
And I suppose I think about, you know, in COVID, horrendous, but a lot of us, it allowed us to get out and about within our 5K, 2K, 5K, or 10K and reconnect with places that are literally on our doorstep that we had no idea existed. To me, when I think about big topics like climate change or sustainability, you know, the way everybody has that drawer or that box full of tangled up cables from old computers or telephones, and how can we pull out one? Where can we start with one thing that we're really going to try and change our behavior? Because otherwise it's just so overwhelming for people. So very much like the other speakers, you know, the getting together outside. Every Monday I do a walk around the estate, mainly for the retired community, mainly women, for gym. There's like 25 women in gym. And these women are in my ear about what we should be doing on the estate and what's important to them and their grandchildren. And they're such a brilliant sounding board for me, and a great way to start the week. The other interesting thing for us is, I suppose, being in such an urban environment. There was an amazing conference last May in Amsterdam called Be for Good Leaders. And one of the pieces of research that was shared, which really connects with what Anja was saying, was you actually make better business decisions if you reconnect with nature. So I'm always encouraging people, you know, we would have a lot of corporates and businesses and events at Airfield. Get out there, take your shoes off, go and have a little walk around, and then come back to your meeting or event, because I guarantee you it will help in terms of the decisions that you make. But super conscious that for people, you know, starting small, doing something that is important to them, and then build on it. Otherwise, it's just all so overwhelming.
Brilliant. I'm just conscious of the time there, and I have one last question for you all. And while I'm asking that, if anybody has any question they want to ask any of our speakers, please feel free to put it into the chat box. So just what are you most looking forward to as spring arrives?
It's already
there, will I?
Yeah, go ahead, Anja.
Being in a native woodland, I absolutely love woodland habitats, and spring, before the leaves come on the trees, is when all the little wildflowers do their best at coming into flower. So, you know, all the bluebells and wood anemone and so many wildflowers, and just to be in that woodland, knowing there's so much latent energy ready to kind of, it's so green and it's so rich, and it really is one of my favorite places. Being in it, there's a particular hazel woodland I'm thinking of up in West Cavan. It's a little nook hidden away between the bend of a stream and a big old drumlin, and it's an incredible place. But any kind of a native woodland or a deciduous woodland in springtime is a really wonderful place to be, listening. The sound of the river, insects, the bees are waking up from hibernation. Yeah, that's what I'm really looking forward to.
James?
Ditto to that. I'm really looking forward to just, it's already happening. The days are getting that little bit longer. There's a little bit more brightness in the air. I have just received all of my seeds for the year. So looking forward to sowing some seeds, and really looking forward to shedding a few layers, you know, taking off the big heavy coats and hats and scarves, really, and just being able to get out there
Straight.
and do it, you know.
Brilliant. How about you, Claire?
Yeah, I mean, taking a deep breath of fresh air wherever that may be. For me, we had an amazing gardener, Martina, who had a dream to own some land and plant cut flowers and sell them as a business. So we are renting land to Martina, and all of her beds are all planted now, and we're all just sitting around waiting. And I suppose cut flowers being such a nasty contributor, you know, in shipping them. So it just will be amazing over the next couple of weeks as Martina's flowers start to come through in these beautiful, beautiful beds, native Irish flowers, an opportunity to talk to kids about them, and also just to see them just being in a beautiful space. Just, I mean, as everyone knows, it just lifts your head. So really looking forward to seeing how that all pans out.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emil. Yeah, and what you were saying about the ladies who donated the land being visionaries, and I suppose it's similar to Greensod, that we have lots of visionary people who we were having a conversation about this the other day. You know, when somebody says who is Greensod, and they say what people donate the land, that like who in their right mind would give away land, and they're really forward thinking kind of people, really. So we're lucky enough to have lots of those types of people donate land to us. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the time here. We have one question in the chat box. What resources, it's from Marta, what resources and steps can you recommend if I want to rewild an area of native woodland? It's
read Owen Dalton's book, if you haven't already. An Irish Rainforest, isn't it? By Owen Dalton.
yeah,
That's a good first step if you want to rewild a piece of woodland.
brilliant.
I would say to that, just see what's there. You know, acknowledge what's there. There may be a little bit of remedial work you may need to do. Like if you have sometimes our woodlands can get overrun with laurel or, different invasive plants. There may be a little bit of work that needs to be done just to clear some things out, actually, to allow other things to regenerate. And take your
You can
time.
get grants to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I would agree with James. I think don't panic, you know, let nature do what nature does best, and get as much advice as you want. Don't let anybody tell you should be doing X, Y, or Z, as often that can be the problem. You know, there's people looking over the fence always, but
Yeah.
take your time and try and gather as much data as you can on the sites.
The first step is making that decision to do it in the first place. That's a huge, huge, brilliant decision to make.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose, yeah, if anybody is interested in, you know, the whole idea of connecting with people who are also of like-minded, Greensod Ireland run volunteer days, and just to give a little plug on a volunteer day we're running in our Connemara land. It's near Linan, and it's a Explore Your Shore Citizen Science Day. So if anybody is interested in that, it's on the 10th of February for a couple of hours in the morning, and it'll be a great way to see a remote part of Connemara. It's a beautiful site anyway. It's just a great place to go. Then get in touch, keep an eye on our social media and our website. So there's one other question from Jay, and we might leave it at that then. Thoughts on rewilding a bog?
Yeah, I was at a webinar yesterday where there was a talk by a woman called Florence Renu Wilson. She's an expert on peatland conservation and re-wetting peatlands. So in terms of rewilding a bog, the best thing to do is to manage the water levels. Now, I don't know what state it's at now, but she gave a figure for every centimetre of the water table rises, there's a huge amount of an increase in the carbon storage, as in reversing the loss. You know, when a peatland is drained and degraded, it's releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. And when you raise the water table up again to where it naturally would be, that goes a long way to restoring the biodiversity and the climate benefits of a peatland. So rewilding a bog, need more information, but the water table is probably where you want to look at, and if you can raise the water table on it.
Yeah, it can be quite a difficult thing to achieve, I think, but it's very site specific.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. Yep, very.
Yeah. Okay.
As a rule of
Okay.
thumb. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to Anja and Claire and James and Jenny, of course, for keeping the show on the road, as you always do, Jenny. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. So happy St. Brigid's Day, everybody.
Happy St. Brigid's Day, everyone. Thanks, Janet.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.